joining the first session of 6 on Climate Emergency Where Science Meets Policy webinar series. This is leading up to the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland, approaching in the beginning of November. The topic today is the basics of climate science. Welcome to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or more commonly known as the IPCC. By the end of this discussion, we hope you all have a better understanding of what the IPCC is and its role with dealing with the climate emergency. If you have any questions, there will be time to address those at the end of the interview. Please be advised this webinar is being recorded to be shared for future training purposes. So I am joined here today and who better to tell us about the IPCC is Thelma Krug, Vice Chair of the IPCC and Senior Expert for the Coalition for Rainforest Nations.
Hello, it's really great to be here with all of you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Thelma. So we're seeing the catastrophic impacts of climate change happening all around the globe. Hurricanes, massive flooding, fires. It's all quite scary. And I think most people want to know, how are governments around the world addressing this? So let's talk about the IPCC. When was it established and what was the mission?
Well, the IPCC is an organization with 195 governments that are members of the United Nations, and it was created in 1988, jointly by the World Meteorological Organization and also the United Nations Environment Programme. So it is 33 years old. So the goal of IPCC is to provide governments at all levels with policy relevant, but not policy prescriptive, scientific information that they can use to develop the climate policies, and also to have the most updated scientific findings that can support some decisions at the political forum, for instance, the Climate Change Convention. So regularly, IPCC provides assessments of the scientific basis of climate change, its impact and future risks, and options for adaptation and mitigation. And all this based on the relevant literature all over the world, because IPCC does not do its own research.
So when you say mitigation, what do you mean by that?
Thanks for that question, Michael, because it's not always very clear what is meant by mitigation. So I'm going to provide you the definition of the IPCC that says that mitigation relates to a human intervention to reduce the sources of greenhouse gases or enhance the sinks of these gases. So giving you an example of a source, for instance, deforestation, and reforestation would be an example of a sink of greenhouse gas.
Well, thank you for clarifying that for me. So now tell us what exactly is expected of the IPCC? How does it operate as an intergovernmental panel?
Well, obviously, what is expected from the IPCC is that the assessments provide scientific, relevant information on the state of the knowledge on all aspects of climate change. So since 1988, when IPCC was created, the IPCC has had 5 assessment cycles, each one of approximately 5 to 6 years. So far, IPCC delivered 5 assessment reports, which are really bulky. You know, contributions from the 3 working groups, as we will see, amount to almost 5,000 pages. So these assessment reports are considered to be the most comprehensive scientific reports about climate change worldwide. But it also produced a series of methodological reports, special reports, and technical papers. Most of the time, these reports are produced as per request of the governments, but also sometimes IPCC receives invitation from the Climate Change Convention, from the governments that are members to the convention, and also from the international organizations. So we are now in the 6th cycle that started in 2015 and ends in 2022. And so far we have had 3 special reports and the contribution of one of the working groups that was released last month.
So you got me when you 5 to 6 years working on what you call the most comprehensive scientific reports about climate change produced worldwide. That seems like a pretty huge undertaking. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how these reports are generated.
Yes, thanks, Michael. I think that if we have a picture of the structure of the IPCC, which I think that gives an idea how is the IPCC is structured. Not everybody knows exactly that we have a very few number of people that are fixed member staffs of the IPCC. And so I think that this will help clarify. So what do you see here in this figure? On the top, you see the logos of the WMO and UNEP, the founders of the IPCC. They call themselves the mother and the father of the IPCC. But I don't think they came to grounds who is the father and who is the mother.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Who's the mother and who's the father?
Well, they work okay. Okay. So anyway, if we in that picture we see the secretariat on the right-hand side, and the secretariat is the only part of the structure of the IPCC where you have paid members, paid staff members. Today, 14 people. So these are the fixed people in the IPCC, and so they have innumerous tasks from legal advice, IT support, communication, organization of meetings. This is just to list a few of the numerous tasks they have.
It's interesting that you said the secretariat is the only part of the IPCC structure with paid employees. So are the other members of the layers below in the figure, are they elected or do they just contribute voluntarily?
Well, in fact, they are both. Okay, so they are all elected, and interestingly enough, by the 195 member governments by secret ballot. And this is during a plenary session. Well, except for the last layer when we are talking about the authors, review editors, which we're going to talk later on, all these contribute their time and expertise voluntarily to the IPCC during the whole duration of the cycle. But let's now move, Michael, to the plenary, which is the first layer we have there. So the layer is the 195 member governments that I already mentioned, and they work by consensus and to decide on the organization's budget and also on the work program. For instance, they have several tasks as well, including the scope and outline of all reports that are agreed by the panel, as I said, by consensus, and seeking to ensure that the scope includes the relevant scientific information to help them develop their public policies related to climate change and also decisions.
Okay, so let's see. So that covers the plenary. Up next would be the Bureau. Tell us about them.
Well, the Bureau has many roles, and I would single out one, which is to provide guidance to the panel on the scientific and technical aspects of its work. The Bureau has 33 members, representing the 6 regions of the IPCC, and they are elected at the end of every cycle. So besides the chair, it consists also of the 3 vice chairs, of which I am one of them, and the 8 co-chairs that come from the 3 working groups and the task force on national greenhouse gas inventories, which I'm going to call TFI to simplify. And also each working group, as we're going to see later, has six Bureau members. So you see vice chairs of the working group. So if you consider the 3 working groups, then you would have 18 members there as well. But the election process is interesting because it has to ensure that the agreed number of regional representatives in the Bureau is met, and obviously securing the scientific and technical expertise. But for instance, presently, Africa has 7 representatives in the Bureau, South America has 4, Asia has 6, North and Central America and Caribbean has 4, Europe 8, and Southwest Pacific 4. So this is really great because the Bureau then represents all the regional diversity. And it's really helpful to go that way.
Yes. So let's see. So we now have a mother and father, the plenary, the secretariat, and the bureau. Let's move on to the executive committee. Tell us about them.
Well, executive committee is just a subset of the bureau, and it includes only the chair, the 3 vice chairs, and the 8 co-chairs of the 3 working groups and the TFI. So its roles, among several others, is to facilitate the implementation of the work program of the IPCC in a timely and effective way. And also it undertakes also communication and outreach activities, which are really important, really essential to broadly communicate the findings in the reports of the IPCC.
Great. So thank you. Now that we believe we covered the top layers there. So let's move on to the working groups. What is their role?
Well, the actual production of the reports is carried out within the working groups and the task force. And these are co-chaired by 2 elected members, the co-chairs, one from developing country and another one from a developing country. And they are supported by a technical support unit, which you also see in the figure. And this technical support unit provides scientific, technical, and organizational support to the co-chairs and the bureau in the preparation and the production of the report.
So yes, so the technical support unit, or the TSUs, those were the ones underlying the work group. So who requests those and where are they located?
Well, the TSUs are really, really important because they provide the scientific and technical support to the co-chairs and the working group and the task force, right? So when you consider that these huge reports are produced, you really need a huge number of people on the background to try to put that together, and also the meetings of the authors. So they have numerous tasks, right? So when a country nominates an expert to be in a co-chair position, it already indicates that it will provide financial support for the establishment of a technical support unit. So normally, these units are established in the countries of the elected co-chairs.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Sorry to interrupt you with my questions there. Please continue on with the other working groups.
Yeah, so now talking about the working groups. So presently, what we have are 3 working groups. It has been like that for some time. And each one of them is tasked with a dealing with different aspects of climate change. So, for instance, if we take working group 1, it focuses on the physical science basis of climate change. So it assesses the state of the atmosphere, the surface, the ocean, the cryosphere. Also, for instance, the contribution of anthropogenic and natural causes of climate change. They also make future projections based on climate models. So just to list, a very limited focus of the working group 1, just to give an idea. And then if we go to working group 2, working group 2 focuses on impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability, and covers a vast range of topics, including impacts that have already been observed and risks of future impacts. For instance, on the projected hydrological changes, vulnerability of terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems due to climate change. And it has one singularity of the working group 2 is that it has specific chapters for the regions. So you have a whole chapter for Africa, a whole chapter for South America, a whole chapter for Europe. And this is really welcomed by the governments, because it provides the opportunity to focus on impacts, adaptation, and vulnerabilities, of which they are very concerned about and want to know in a very dedicated way. And then we go to working group 3 that addresses mitigation of climate change. And I would say that this working group focuses on the solution space, right? So it is looking at how we can mitigate climate change through the reduction of emissions or enhancement of the things, as we talked at the beginning, the definition of mitigation. And they also are focusing on more sectors: energy, industrial processes, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, waste. So it's the whole range of sectors that also the inventories, for instance, concentrate on.
Right.
And then finally we have the task force. We have the task force on national greenhouse gas inventories. They have different dynamics. They also have a TSU in Japan. And obviously they develop methodologies for estimating emissions and removals of greenhouse gases. And one particularity of it is that the Climate Change Convention makes it mandatory that all parties, all countries, report their emissions, or net emissions, I would say, using the IPCC methodologies. So it is really a concrete use of a product of the IPCC from beginning to end.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, you were part of the task force for greenhouse gas inventories, correct?
Yeah, I was elected co-chair of the TFI during 2 cycles before I was elected the vice chair. It was really a very nice opportunity to understand really how the inventories are proposed to be addressed. So it's really great.
Yeah, it's very impressive there, Thelma.
Well, then, Michael, I think we come to the last line of the figure. And that's where we find the real champions in the production of the reports of the IPCC. The hundreds of experts around the world who volunteer their time, their expertise to the IPCC. So for you to have an idea, for the reports of the 3 working groups in this cycle, we have 234 authors in working group 1, 430 in working group 2, and 240 authors in working group 3. So it's a huge number of authors. And for the assessment reports, they have to be on board for many years, dedicating themselves considerably.
Well, champions indeed. I very much agree with you on that term there for them.
Yes, as I said, they are truly devoted to the work of the IPCC and to what they do. Absolutely. Okay. So, Michael, I hope that my brief response to your question helped to clarify the structure of the IPCC, which is renewed at every cycle. So all the members change through the election process, except the Secretariat, which is the fixed staff of the IPCC.
Of course. Yes, thank you. Your description was great, and the breakdown of the IPCC, it really helped me understand. So I very much appreciate that. I would have never known that unless you would have walked me through that. So I guess now that we've covered the actual structure of it, let's move on to the reports. How are they generated? Tell us about that.
Well, that's really an interesting part of the whole process. Very few people know exactly what it entails from beginning to end. What are the steps that are involved? So I think that this figure here helps a lot. And I used to say, Michael, that through this process that people will see, I'm not going to go in detail to any, to all of these, but the process of the IPCC ensures that a bridge is established between the governments and the scientists. So I do see this as a very interesting opportunity for this engagement. It's the process of IPCC. So if I want to start on step 1, where you see scoping, each IPCC report of the IPCC is preceded by a scoping meeting, and the participants being nominated by the government's focal point, observer organizations, bureau members. And what do they do during this scoping meeting? They develop a draft outline of the report that is planned to be produced. And they also include some explanatory notes. It goes like, this chapter and these main topics. So it doesn't go into too many details, but you go up to the first layer with bullet points for each one of the chapters. So this outline is taken to the governments for their appreciation, and obviously the governments interact with also with the scientists, because they want to ensure that their concerns, what they want to hear from the scientific point of view, are being captured in the outline produced by those that participated in the scoping meeting. So at that point, they decide whether the work should continue in preparing the report, and then they agree on the final scope through this interaction, and the outline, and also the work plan that includes the schedule, the budget, right? So once this is agreed, the Secretariat sends a letter of invitation for the focal points to every member government of the IPCC, asking them to nominate their experts that could contribute to the production of the report according to the scope that has been agreed by them. Then these authors, when the nominations are received, they are carefully selected to ensure not only the range of expertise needed, but also a good balance in terms of gender, in terms of geographical representation, representation from experts of developed countries, developing countries, countries with economies in transition. And also, it's important to have a mixture of authors with and without experience or previous experience in the IPCC, which I call the new blood into the IPCC, which IPCC very much welcomes.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Keep it fresh, right? And it's great that they have an emphasis on gender. You also mentioned the focal point of each member country. Who are they?
Well, the national focal point serves as a point of contact between the governments and the IPCC. And they are designated by an official letter by the ministry, normally by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the country, but if not, by an appropriate authority in the country. Every country has an IPCC focal point. And don't forget, the focal point is the one that sends the nominations of authors to the IPCC. So it is good that they know that you, an expert, exist. So that is also important.
And can the experts be from corporations or NGOs? Can they be invited?
Yeah, the IPCC respects very much diversity and welcomes the participation of experts from corporations or NGOs whenever their experience and expertise is needed. So this contributes to make the assessment more comprehensive and also the report more robust. Now, Michael, we come on stage 5 of our figure. So what happens once the author team is selected? Okay, so they are selected, they begin work on a first order draft of the report based on the assessment of the relevant scientific, technical and socio-economic information around the world, as I said. So this first draft, I would say, is a very drafty draft, if I may. And but it's sent to experts so that these experts around the world can comment on the accuracy, on the completeness of the content and the overall balance of the draft. So it's important at this stage that you have other experts contributing to that draft, right? And every comment that is received from the experts are considered by the authors, one by one. And then after that, they initiate the draft of a second order draft. When it's ready and it's in a much better shape than the first order draft report, then it's sent again to the experts, and it's also sent to governments who have the opportunity to comment on that draft. And this is where I see this bridge being, the governments being included in commenting the content of the draft, indicating where they think it could be improved, indicating literature that has not been assessed, and so on. So the consideration of the comments by the authors of each chapter, which is importantly, it is followed by the called review editors. Review editors sit at the meeting where the comments are being addressed by the authors of each chapter to see if each comment is being duly addressed, if there is no bias in the consideration of that, right? So all the review comments, which are in an Excel spreadsheet, and the response of the authors, yes, we are going to incorporate that in the final draft, or no, sorry, we are not going to take it into account. It has to be explained. And these are published on completion of the report. After this phase, the authors work on the final draft of the report and a summary for policymakers. And this summary, it contains the main findings of the report. And why it's done so? For several reasons. Because then you are taking the attention of the governments for very, very special findings of the report, novel aspects since the previous assessment report. It normally has about 30 pages. So the governments can comment, not the experts this time, but the governments can comment on this summary for policymakers. And finally, this summary is taken to a plenary session where it's considered line by line and for approval by consensus. And when every line by line is approved, then the summary is approved and the report is accepted. So this is a long story, but you see how complex it is. And just to give you just a hint, normally when we didn't have COVID times, these approval sessions would take a week. Most of the time, the last day is day and night. It is very complex. During COVID time, we had sessions for 2 weeks, starting at 1 o'clock in Brazil, for instance, but absolutely ensuring the participation of every one country in the discussion.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. What a complex process. I could, more power to you again for all the work that you do. And thank you so much. We're very fortunate to have an expert like yourself guide us through this today. It certainly helped me understand more of the IPCC and how it works. And you've answered all my questions for now. So I would like to open it up to the floor for anybody that's watching now. Any questions for Thelma on the IPCC? Please, there's a raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. Just please raise your hand and we'll happily answer whatever questions you have. So let's see, we have a question coming in from Hillary Dassey, I believe, here. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul Danoon, on my queue here. Hi, Paul.
First, full disclosure, I work with these two, so this is maybe a loaded question, but Thelma, a lot of people commented that the latest report that came from the IPCC seemed to lay out in a more forceful tone the challenges and the risks faced by climate change. Would you agree with that assessment? You're on mute, Thelma.
Sorry. Yes, Paul, I thank you for the question, and I agree with the assessment. But why do I agree? It's because every new assessment you have more robust climate models. You have more information. You have more data, and especially in this last report of Working Group 1 that was published last month, you do have more integration of the evidence. Many evidence that you have in terms of the climate change. So indeed, I think that there are several issues that have been raised in the report that in particular I appreciated very much. One of them is the fact that it is possible now to attribute some of the extreme events that are happening, in particular in the last decade, to the human influence. And more specifically, you have high confidence that the warm spells, really the situation of that we saw in Canada, for instance, right, with the very, very hot weather, the hot waves that we saw, very much attributed to the influence of humans. This also spreads to the heavy rains, droughts, not with as much confidence as for the hot temperature, as I mentioned. Really extreme climatic events. Some people say meteorological events, but for the temperature, yeah, it's very, very high confidence on that. So this is one aspect. The other one that I think is also important to raise is the fact that previously the IPCC in the report of special report of 2018, it thought that 1.5 degrees Celsius would be reached between 2030 and 2052. In this report, because of the new data in the model, it anticipated that for the next 20 years. So making it, if we don't have very rapid and profound reductions, sustainable reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, it is very unlikely that we are going to get to 1.5. So it is possible that we get by 2050 to less than 2 degrees Celsius, but it depends very much on the efforts, global efforts that will be taken in all sectors to reduce emissions very rapidly and very intensively.
Thank you, Thelma. Just in the effort of time, we've run over a little bit, but are there any other questions we can answer? And please feel free to also share our information here with you. If anybody has any questions that we'd like to address, please email me at michael@cfrn.org. You can follow us on the Twitter at @CFRN_org and our LinkedIn. Please also feel free to reach out at any time for us for questions on there. Is there anybody here now that would like to ask another question before we wrap up? Thelma, I think you did a great job today to explaining that. We covered a lot of things. Everyone, we did record the session, as I said previously, so I will share it with everyone who maybe came in late, so you can catch up and again follow us up with us later on with any questions. We are happy to answer them. We hope you join us next week, same day, same time, to discuss emission factors, where they stand, what's causing the increases, and what are the implications of the growth. So we hope you can come and join us for that then. Hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you for doing your part in helping overcome a climate emergency. Of course, we're all in this together. So take care. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Yeah, and visit the IPCC site as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Thelma.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.